Now let's cover success metrics. Success metrics are metrics that you create and define as a product manager to say whether or not your application has succeeded in accomplishing what you hope to accomplish. Typically, success metrics are focused on just a few key metrics, and they're usually somewhat custom. There's a lot of best practices out there, but it's always going to depend on how your application is created and how you structured it to begin with. These are the key metrics that I've created for Torch. There's other metrics that could be incorporated in here, but these are the ones that I think would best describe the goal that we have. So on the top row, we have engaged users, successful runs, and then successful runs per engaged user. On the bottom row, we have total relays, engaged relays, and then an engaged relay ratio. And I'll walk through each one of these in depth as we go through the rest of this presentation. But the key point to note is that I'm really actually just focusing on two key dimensions. The first one is just the users and their engagement to the application in a way that's specifically oriented towards what we wanted them to accomplish. And then the second one is sort of the key content that we have on our platform and how engaging that content actually is. Let's take a look at user engagement. Here I've created a user engagement funnel, and it's pretty simplistic, but covers the key pieces that are relevant in our application. If we look at the top part of the funnel, we have the fact that a user is registered. So if they thought our application was interesting enough, then they signed up, which is great. But it doesn't mean that they did anything. That's why we have the next section, which is active. So for an active user, I'm defining it as a user who participates in at least one relay. And that could be a relay that they created or just joined. And that's going to be my definition for active, because we know that in order for you to do any key piece of value on this platform, you have to participate first in a relay. So as long as we have that, we at least have a sense that the user is somewhat active in the goals that we've set for them. Then the last piece of the funnel is engaged. Here I'm saying that an engaged user is a user that completes at least one progress post. In other words, they've joined a relay and they've actually done one piece of progress in relation to that relay. That's probably the smallest amount that we can ask for a user to know that they're actually engaging with our application in the way that we've designed it. So if we look from this funnel, we can see at the very top, it's probably going to be our biggest amount of users, and we're going to slowly funnel down into the areas where we care more. It's important to lay out the entire funnel because we want to be able to see what the drop-off rate is across these different pieces. For example, if we get a lot of registered users, but only a tiny percentage of them are active, then we know something is wrong, and we need to fix that particular issue. Similarly, if we see that we actually get a lot of active users, but no one is completing any progress, no one's becoming engaged, then we have another issue. We need to fix that as well. Another thing to note with user engagement metrics is that they require a duration. So this could be daily, weekly, monthly, or any time variation that you want to create. It's important to do this because it allows you to eventually break down users into cohorts. These are the two metrics that highlight user value. So there's a bunch of different ways that we could have defined this, but I'm going to keep it pretty simple. And the first one is that I'm going to create a metric called total successful runs. And this is essentially a simplistic measure on how well the application is able to help users complete their goals. And we're going to compute a run by saying that a run is equal to the completed relay times the number of teammates in that relay times the percentage of those teammates who completed all the points. So if you think about it, it's effectively the total number of goals that users on the platform were able to accomplish. This metric can also be tweaked. For example, right now I'm saying it should be the percentage who completed all points. Maybe as time goes on, it might be more meaningful to reduce that to say completing, at least 50% of the points or something along those lines. We also want to create a per user value. So we just want to take these successful runs and divide that by the number of valid users. So in this case, the number of engaged users. And this just gives us a sense for the total value per user, as opposed to our total successful runs, which would be the total value overall that we're creating. Now let's look at the relay engagement funnel. So similarly to the user engagement funnel, we have a couple different components that are broken down. So the first one is that at the top of the funnel, we have relays that are just created. It is a valuable activity because anytime a relay is created, then users can join it. And then we want to funnel that into active. So active here, I'm defining as having at least 2 participants, including the creator. So when we think about the dynamics that we're trying to enable, we want there to be a social component. It's great if a relay is created and the creator is able to accomplish the goal based on the relay, but they didn't really use the social component. And the social component is a huge element to the accountability that we want to offer. So in order to make sure that that value is there, or to at least track that that value exists, we want to create this active category that says another person needs to join your relay. This brings us to the last section, which is the engaged part of the funnel. And here I'm defining it as relays that have at least one progress post per week for at least 2 weeks. And again, this can be modified as time goes on. Maybe it should be 2 or 3 progress posts per week for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. It really depends on how the user behavior actually works out. For now, based on the fact that we just created it and we are hypothesizing on how people will behave, this will be our initial benchmark, and we'll just have an understanding that it needs to probably be modified to have the appropriate numbers there. The entire intention behind having it there to begin with, despite not really having any data, is to set a benchmark for ourselves based on our own assumptions, so we can kind of figure out how the actual behavior will map to those assumptions. The last piece of data that we want is user behavior data. Now, the user behavior data are actually not part of the key metrics, but they're really important to just being able to track and understand overall behavior on the application. And there's more statistics that you can compute beyond what I have here, but these are the ones that I think are probably going to be the most relevant for us. So under user statistics, there's knowing the duration of a visit, there's knowing the frequency of the visit. So, are people spending 5 minutes on the app, or are they spending 30 seconds? Are they coming 3 times a day, or are they only showing up every 2 weeks? Depending on what you get, it could be very interesting and define how you might create product improvement features in the future. I think you also want to take a look at average relays per user. Again, the number of relays that a user creates or joins is really relevant to how value flows throughout the application. So just knowing how many is created there is very valuable, especially if we see that the relays or the average relays per user is below 1. Something like that would tell you that basically there's a lot of users in there that aren't creating relays, and that might be something to essentially optimize for in the future. And we also want to be able to see average progress posts per user. If we see that actually, despite the total number of posts on our site, the average post per user is below 1 or below some number that we're happy with, it means that there's a bunch of users on there that aren't really doing anything. And that could be something, again, to fix in the future. We also want to know relay statistics. Number of relays by type is an interesting statistic that can be very relevant for future improvement. For example, if we find that actually a certain relay type, like health or something, is the predominant one by far, like let's say by 85% or something like that, then that tells us that people are really using the app specifically for health. That might be an indication that in the future we should actually just maybe cut out the other types and focus it to be a health-oriented one. Frequency is also another interesting one to take a look at because it might give us some insight into which frequencies are more successful than others. For example, if there's one that happens every single day of the week, that one might not be successful versus maybe one that is just doing something once a week. And those are maybe suggestions that we can offer in the future to help people provide goals that are more reasonable. We also want to take a look at the number of relays by status, and that can tell us effectively the distribution of the status for each one of our relays. So if there's actually, for example, a ton of completed relays, but very, very few active relays, it means that historically users have been really active, but then they've sort of stopped or become uninterested. And that could be obviously a very interesting thing for us to know and give us insight on to improve. We also want to take a look at things like average teammates per relay, progress posts per relay, and likes per post. These things, again, will tell us effectively how well the social dynamics are working, how well the engagement for the posts are working, and how much encouragement the teammates are actually providing per relay. And if the metrics don't look like successful metrics, that can tell us that either we need to do some optimization or really change up the way that we've currently built it.